Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Flow podcast by Highland Yoga, hosted by founder Elsie Brotherton and co-hosts Reedy Dukes and Annalie Burke. Highland Yoga is an Atlanta-based hot yoga studio founded in 2015 in the quaint neighborhood of Virginia Highlands. And it's hard to wrap our minds around just how much we've grown and evolved since then. We already know our community is hooked on whatever magic is within our walls, and we want to offer you more outside of that. We can't wait to dive deep into all things yoga and wellness, but more importantly, what makes our world go round: our teachers, our devoted students, our community offerings, and more. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Find Your Flow. I'm your host, Reedy Dukes, and I'm really excited to have Savannah Young join us this week. Hi, Savannah. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Savannah Young is a functional medicine nurse practitioner, retreat facilitator, yoga teacher, and coach who leads her clients through an unfiltered lens. She believes intuition and fluid thinking lay the groundwork for a health-inspired life. She combines her love of lifestyle medicine with client-specific history and goals to optimize health and wellness. She believes an individualized approach catered to each client is the key to longevity and true health. She currently resides now in Denver, Colorado, and she's working on her IFMCP certification. And Savannah is also a former member of our teacher team. So we are really excited to have her. Savannah, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your yoga journey and how you found Highland Yoga?
Yeah, so can't talk about my yoga journey without talking about my health journey because those two are intertwined. And you'll probably hear me say that a lot today. But I found yoga after I got sick in my very early 20s. End of college, was hit by a bunch of GI symptoms that no one could really figure out what it was. And I was told from different doctors that it was different conditions. And one of the things that they told me at the time, I was a long distance runner, was to stop intense exercise. And if you are an endurance junkie like I am, that feels nearly impossible. So I started kind of putting myself in places to open myself up to yoga and Pilates and just like lower intensity things. And I actually found Highland Yoga when I was working in the ICU as a nurse on night shift. And there was a class that was at 4:30, which was perfect timing, or 4:45 for me to finish, wake up, take a yoga class, and then go in for my shift. And it was just the perfect low intensity mindset that I needed in order to prep for 12 hours. So that is how I found Highland. And as I worked to heal my mind and, get better in flexibility, mobility, movement, it also in turn started to heal my health and change my perspective.
That's amazing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how your health journey has transformed a little bit and what's gotten you into helping others in kind of a similar way, hopefully?
Yeah. No, literally, I say it was like the worst, probably one of the worst things that's ever happened to me in my life, but honestly, the biggest catalyst, and it gave me my career. Like truly, had it not happened, I don't know where I would have gone career-wise. Like I said, I got sick right after college and I had gotten into nursing school at the time, but I wasn't one of those people who's like, oh, I definitely want to be a nurse. It was just like, I love health and wellness. I love prevention. I love movement. Not totally sure how that all fits. And then bam, got really sick, went through the gamut of Western medicine doctors, so GI specialists. I even went to the Mayo Clinic for a full week and did like a super intense workup with like invasive testing and was kind of told like, oh, your motility, which is like basically the nervous system that helps your gut digest food, just stopped working. Like, sorry, it's idiopathic. We don't really know why. Like, here's a dietary handout. And it was like Powerade, Jello, and like broth. And I like, 20 something year old me is like in tears. And I was like, there's got to be another way. There has to be more answers. And so that is how I became a patient in functional medicine first. And at the time, a lot of people didn't really know about it. Like, I feel like in recent years, it's blown up and it's becoming more common knowledge. But 10 years ago or so, that wasn't the case. And it was very expensive. And honestly, I didn't fully trust it. But upon further testing, longer patient appointments, they were able to identify what was actually going on with me. And it was a combination of motility for sure, but also fungus overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, infections in the gut, adrenal nervous system dysregulation, so many things that Western medicine had never even like touched on. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. Functional medicine is a marathon always. But through that process, I was able to actually begin to heal my body. And I can confidently say that it's 80 something percent better. So it really did like heal me when Western medicine told me that I may or may not need a feeding tube for the rest of my life. So big difference.
Sounds incredibly stressful and terrifying. I'm so glad that you've improved so much and that functional medicine has helped you. I'm curious, why do you think it's taken so long for us to be more familiar with functional medicine, and maybe explain what that even means to those
Yeah.
who aren't familiar?
Totally. Great question. So the way I like to describe functional medicine is functional medicine as a whole is like a big sticker or a tag, and any practitioner can really practice it. So that's where it gets really nuanced. In my personal and obviously very biased, but personal and professional opinion, you want a provider who is Western medicine trained as well. So what that means is they've gone through either nurse practitioner school, PA school, DO school, or MD school. Those are the four Western medicine certifications that, like, with your life can kind of trust. And then, so they have that foundation. They can prescribe medications when needed. They can work with your other specialists and providers and interpret what they're saying. And then you can also get Eastern and functional training. And so functional medicine is essentially, to me, marrying the two worlds between Western medicine and what's available to us and root cause medicine. So Western medicine's really good at being reactive. So like if I get in a car accident, please take me to the emergency room. That's where I want to go, Western medicine all day. But what we're not good at in this country is chronic illness. So, when you think about the history of medicine itself, it was set up to help treat disease. Like we used to not have a long lifespan. We would have these really bad infectious diseases. So the invention of antibiotics and emergency medicine were necessary. But now that we're living longer and we live these sedentary lifestyles, in the last 50 years or so, maybe longer, we've started seeing an uptick in major causes of death not being from infectious disease, but instead diabetes, heart disease, heart attack, stroke, which is basically lifestyle. So functional, and because Western medicine wasn't built on that foundation, they're very reactive. It's, oh, you've developed this condition, here's medications to manage it. Whereas functional medicine says, let's look at all this stuff yearly, or however often your provider recommends, deeper than what Western medicine will give you. Let's look at these biomarkers and catch it before it starts to occur. Let's intervene from an herb, behavioral, mental health, like entire full body shift so that the idea of diabetes or hypertension isn't even possible to develop, if that makes sense.
Totally. And I think, like you said, it is a marathon. And I think as a society, we are very results based and just like fix my problem ASAP. But I totally understand how it's marrying both worlds. And there are so many topics I want to touch on and pick your brain on.
Of course.
Um, I was talking to a friend this morning about basically how common autoimmune disorders or diseases are. You can differentiate, I don't know the proper term, but how common it seems like they are these days, or maybe there's just more awareness around it and like strides towards an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle. So if you want to just explain to us how that all works, really anything you want to offer to our listeners.
Yeah. So I'll kind of give you both, right? Because most people are probably more familiar with the Western medicine route. So usually you develop set of symptoms, and autoimmune disease can be basically it's when your immune system attacks a part of your body. And it's trying to protect you. Your immune system is there to help you fight off pathogens. When things go haywire, when things are kind of off kilter, it can shift and your body can kind of start to attack itself or certain glands in the body. And that is in a nutshell kind of what autoimmune disease is.
Mhm.
Now, Western medicine approach, you develop these symptoms, like I said, and you usually go to your PCP and they'll run like what's called an ANA or an anti-nuclear antibody. And depending how positive that is, they might refer you out to rheumatology. And that's kind of the Western medicine specialist for autoimmune disease. And your rheumatologist will run deeper tests and then figure out, what the disease is, what it's named based on pathology, and then potentially put you on prescriptions. And that tends to be where that road ends. Functional medicine, or the way that I interpret it, is, and I work with rheumatologists all the time. They are amazing. One of my best friends is actually in residency to become a rheumatologist.
Okay.
But I truly believe autoimmune disease doesn't happen out of thin air. So you have genes, epigenetics, things turn on and off. So if you are exposed to the right set of environmental factors, stress, poor diet, poor sleep, anxiety, overstimulation, whatever it may be, an illness, those genes can turn on. And sometimes that's why sometimes it has that genetic component. And that's not always the case, but oftentimes it is. And once that happens, your body will start to attack itself and pick an organ. So, like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, for example, that's when those antibodies attack your thyroid. So, functional medicine and the Institute of Functional Medicine is kind of the certifying body for functional medicine in our country, teaches that autoimmune disease starts and ends in the gut. So instead of targeting the immune system, we actually target gut health. And because of the food additives and, as you said, anti-inflammatory diet and the way that we eat, for the most part, the standard American diet or the SAD diet, our bodies aren't set up for success. Our guts aren't set up for success. The additives, the excessive amounts of gluten, all of it. So for autoimmune disease, no matter what it is, whether it's Sjogren's or rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's, I always say start by getting a stool test and figure out what's going on in the gut.
And where exactly do you go from there?
Yeah. That's a great question. So in Atlanta, so considering most listeners are probably in the Atlanta area,
Yeah.
uh, there are several functional medicine practices. I used to work at one of them called Center Spring MD, and they're in Brookhaven, and they also have a location in Johns Creek. And there's also Stat Wellness, and they are also open in the Atlanta area. And they're both a phenomenal, fantastic functional medicine centers. They're all Western medicine trained providers, and you can get stool tests and functional testing done there. And then based on what that stool test says, it might be that you have like leaky gut per se, which means that the cells in your gut lining aren't nice and tight. So you might need supplements to help keep that lining tight. They might find that you have a sensitivity to like gluten, not a celiac, but just a sensitivity. They might find pathogens or overgrowth or yeast or fungus like I had, or,
Hmm.
um, but without that test, yes, you can absolutely still manage autoimmune conditions. But in my opinion, working to heal from all the systems are interconnected instead of silos. Like Western medicine kind of thinks about them. So it's like you work with those silos, but looking at the body as a system interconnected, kind of like in yoga, where you believe everything's all connected, the eight limbs, like working through that is really the way to support your body long term, in my opinion.
Definitely. And I'm sure it's a relief for patients or clients of these centers to hear that there's actually a root cause and it's not just out of thin air.
Mhm.
Um, they can actually work towards treating it. Um, I'm curious from you, you said thyroid is one of the most common autoimmune diseases.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what else do you have to say about thyroid? Because I mean, I hear that all the time from my family and friends that there's something off in the thyroid, and it's
Yeah.
very confusing.
Totally. Yeah. So your thyroid is a butterfly shaped gland literally in your neck, and it does like 101 functions. Like thyroid does more for you than you could even realize. But I would say most people tend to talk about metabolism with thyroid. It does have a role in metabolism for sure, and temperature regulation and so many things. But the reason that it gets missed a lot is because they teach you in Western med and not rheumatology, that's more specialized. They would run a full panel for sure, but for endocrinology. But in family medicine training, like in NP school, they teach you to just run the TSH, which is one thyroid marker, your thyroid stimulating hormone. And they don't do all the other thyroid markers. So if that looks good, they don't lift the surface. It's almost like the iceberg analogy, where it's like you just see
Hmm.
the tip and you don't realize how much is underneath. So if someone's tip looks good, they're not going to go underneath to look. Whereas for me, with my clients, I will draw nine labs on the thyroid, whether or not they have symptoms, to get an idea of like what that cascade and symphony of hormones is even doing. And I check Hashimoto's markers. And the problem with Hashimoto's is most of the time in Western med, they say there's not much you can do for it. They just say, it's there, manage it, we can track it, but we just will manage the actual TSH and the thyroid hormones with medication, and that's kind of it. Um, and again, I don't necessarily believe that. So my favorite resource to throw out if you're someone who has Hashimoto's or hypothyroid even is Isabella Wentz. She's a pharmacist, and I can give you her link to kind of post with the podcast, but she is really well educated in research and has written books on Hashimoto's. And it's like really actionable steps of things you can take and do. A lot of it is gut health, a lot of it is adrenal health, and a lot of it is diet and just being like living anti-inflammatory. So that's like no gluten. Dairy gets a really bad rap. Some people really do need to eliminate dairy, but I would not say that if you're getting a high quality dairy source, that's always necessary. We know added sugar, of course. And then seed oils are the big four.
What are some common seed oils that we should
Yeah.
technically avoid?
Like canola oil, sunflower seed oil, honestly, anything but avocado and coconut. But it's so hard if you look at like packages, and that can be like you can go down like a rabbit goose chase, like trying to be perfect and perfectionistic. And I think my patients would tell you that I am very much like a realist. Like I love a good glass of red wine. Like I'm not, I'm a functional medicine
Mhm.
provider and I run marathon, long distance runs, but I also like to hang out and I will have that glass of wine and I'll eat a piece of pizza and I'm not going to sit there and preach perfection because that's just unrealistic. So, if you can do low to no seed oil 70% of the time, you're ahead of most people, truly.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's funny too. I've thought about this before, and I deal with certain autoimmune diseases, and they run heavily in my family. But it's like you said, what could exacerbate these diseases is stress itself. So it's like, at what level do you want to stress about the perfect diet and
Mhm.
lifestyle, and what level do you want to have some fluidity? So I feel like it's such a balance.
Yeah, it really is, especially with exercise. And that's such a hot topic as well. Like, how much is too much? What are we supposed to do? All of that good stuff.
Yeah, so how does exercise tie into all this exactly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we're going to kind of shift into adrenal health from here,
Okay.
which it's still thyroid is technically hormone, adrenal's hormone, so we're in the same world. Um, but the hot topic of exercise varies depending on what you're thinking about. So if you're thinking about cardiovascular health, well, yeah, the more exercise you do, the better, because your heart contractility is going to be better. Your likelihood of developing insulin resistance goes down significantly, cholesterol, all of those things. So from a lifestyle perspective, exercise your heart out. But from an adrenal perspective, functional medicine believes that you can overdo it. And that, so cortisol is your stress hormone, and this is like buzzword of the year. I feel like I've seen it everywhere. Like in social media world and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
in the medical world, you need it. It's a hormone. It gets a bad rap, but really cortisol is what your body secretes to help you run from danger. That gives you warning signs when you feel that heightened response. If you're scared, like it's so important.
Yeah, I've been told so many times cortisol is the bad stress hormone.
Hmm. I don't like to label things as good as bad, good and bad.
Yeah.
People say LDL is the bad cholesterol. Okay, yeah, but LDL also makes your hormones, so it's not the bad cholesterol. But yes, it can be bad though. And in our
Yeah.
country, with how stressful things are, the hours we're expected to work, the screen time, the 3,000 multitasks, the pressure of all the things, like cortisol is, yeah, most of our country runs high in cortisol. They do. And the natural curve is that when you wake up in the morning, cortisol is supposed to be high. And then throughout the day, it's supposed to dip slowly and then come down low at night when it's time to go to sleep. And then you should be able to fall asleep easily. when you have stress on the adrenals, particularly over exercisers like myself, you will see a shift in that curve. And that can look like really high cortisol throughout the day. That can be an inverse curve where in the morning you're like wiped and your cortisol is in the toilet and you can barely get out of bed. And then at night you're like wired and like ready to take on the world. I've definitely been there. And then there's flatline where you're completely depleted, exhausted. And I actually see a lot of postpartum moms in that third stage. Um, and why this matters in regard to exercise is that some people say high intensity exercise will deplete your adrenals and will cause that fatigue where you're kind of flatlined, and it will, or it will push it to where the curve's too high or just throw you off kilter. So my philosophy, again, being a realist, is like listen to your body. Like lab values are there. I usually test cortisol via saliva. In the centers that
Okay.
I mentioned earlier, we'll do a saliva test, but you know, you're smarter than you think. Like your feedback your body is giving you is real. And if you really tune in and listen to it and tune out the noise of like X amount of minutes, this much weight training, this much cardio, and see how you feel, that honestly is probably how you're going to get your adrenals in line.
And how do you feel about, obviously, you and I both, at least I think you still do, love hot yoga.
Mhm.
Is it good for us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like yoga, yes, yes, in so many ways. Like it's truly the best of both worlds. Like I call it the trifecta. So you have flexibility, mobility, which obviously
Hmm.
yoga, check, gonna have that. You have the cardiovascular piece, which in hot yoga, because it's a heated room, your heart rate's gonna go up.
Hmm.
So your heart rate in hot yoga class, so a normal human heart beats 60 to 100 beats per minute. In hot yoga, you'll go up to 110, 120 usually, maybe a little higher depending on who you are, but that's pretty good cardiovascular. And then the strength. I mean, you hold these poses, and that's the third part of the trifecta is the strength piece, and you really do build so much strength. So it's a low impact, low adrenal stress activity. Like it's truly one of the best things you can do for yourself.
Yeah, and since you moved, our studio is offering more and more of our slow and steady classes, and we're getting such good feedback on that. I'm just thinking about strength and holding the poses. A lot of people say it feels more challenging than our typical power flow. So it's really cool to see that shift, and it seems like there's more and more demand for it. I love teaching it too. Um, but I want to ask you, going back a little bit more personal for you, like your shift from your endurance, you're a runner, right? Or
Yeah.
triathlete?
Yeah, I do try.
Yeah. And you still do that, right?
I do, but a lot less frequent.
Okay.
A lot less frequent.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about your shift from the high intensity to the more Pilates and yoga, what that was like for you, the benefit, like the physical and mental benefits of making that gradual transition to something different?
Yeah. So I actually, you know how they say like you can do a lesson when someone tells you to do something, you do it because they tell you and you resent them. But then when you get to when you do have that, when you come across that lesson again later, but it's for yourself, you're like, aha. Uh,
Yes.
I definitely had that with these. So the first time I was told slow down, stop your high intensity, do your yoga Pilates was when I got sick, when I was like 22, 23. And I resented it. Like I did not want to do it. I was like, it felt like I was gritting my teeth. I really didn't listen, to be honest. I just kept pushing. And then as I found functional medicine and got better, I ramped way back up my physical activity to the point where during COVID, I was running and biking. And I mean, it was just constant hours on end of endurance sports. And I think part of me did love it. But I think also at that time, my nervous system was just in such a fight or flight for a myriad of reasons that it really served me for that period.
Hmm.
And once I kind of got past that, an injury actually forced me to stop going as hard in the endurance realm. But even with the repair of that injury, like in the last 2 years, I have found myself like almost not wanting to do it because of how much better I feel physiologically. And
Right.
my yoga practice is significantly stronger, and I'm much more inclined if I had to choose between a long endurance bike ride or yoga. I'm more inclined to pick the yoga, which like 25-year-old me would be on the floor, like truly, if she heard that. But that is the truth for me right now.
Yeah, for those of us who are addicted to high intensity
Hmm.
activity, do you have any pointers for, like you mentioned, how that relates to cortisol and fight or flight? And
Hmm.
I can relate to that. Like I definitely am geared towards higher intensity exercise, at least a couple days a week or whatever. But I do find that it's a little hard to wind down afterwards. It's almost like I have to be physically exhausted before I'm mentally chilled out
Hmm.
afterwards. So it's like obviously that's where yoga comes in. But do you have any other pointers like breath work or routines?
Absolutely. So if you can work out in the morning, do. Like obviously, like a 4 p.m. is not going to hurt you, but in yoga, you're fine at, like into the evening because it's a lot lower impact. But like those high intensity hit classes, Orange Theory, long runs, things like that, where you're pushing yourself, morning's better because your cortisol is naturally higher. So you have the whole day to kind of let that curve come down so that you feel
Mhm.
more tired at night. And then adrenal support. So yeah, a lot of times, and this is not always the case, but a lot of times, including my old self, when you're an anxious wreck everywhere you go and your mind, your monkey mind is going and going and going, and you tend to get riled up and you ruminate and you can't slow down, like you're going to be really geared towards those high intensity exercises. And that's not bad. That's your body's way of saying, hey, I'm really overwhelmed. I need to get it out. Emotion, like emotion is energy in motion, right? Like, so you want to move it through you, which is a beautiful thing. And there is a season of life for that. And there's nothing wrong with it as long as you truly feel good. You don't have like severe fatigue and you're able, your hair and your nails and everything in your body, your nutrient levels look good. Um, but I would say that if you start to like work on the adrenals, like stimulating your vagus nerve, so humming, singing, gargling salt water, there are vagus nerve stimulators, weighted blankets at night, putting a red bulb in your nightstand for red light for your eyes. So many things can help to regulate the nervous system, the mental work, time in nature. I think for me, moving to Colorado just did that with me trying. But all those things really helped me make that shift from craving that really high intensity to being like really grounded within myself and not needing that. And then herbs as well. Adaptogenic support is huge.
Can you explain the gargling salt water?
Yeah. So your vagus nerve is cranial nerve 10. So you have 12 cranial nerves, and it's the one that's responsible for digestion and fight or flight, pretty much. So we've heard fight or flight is when your body's really turned on. So, like you said, cortisol, quote unquote, bad hormone. And then you have your rest and digest, which is your parasympathetic. So, your vagus nerve helps with that parasympathetic response. And humming and actually and chanting and yoga stimulates your vagus nerve. So, that's actually part of why your nervous system feels so relaxed after Shavasana or after you practice, is because you are stimulating that vagus nerve. Um, and gargling salt water or gargling water in general, that's the same thing. It's also stimulating that nerve.
Okay, so it's equally as much like the motion of the gargle.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, just thinking about gut health, adrenal health. Um, for the typical stressed out person who goes to yoga a few times a week,
Mhm.
are there any supplement protocols you recommend or any resources or books you want to share with
Oh
us?
my gosh. Yeah. Loaded question, but yeah, like so many. I think, obviously an individualized protocol is best, of course, because your whole life depends on family history and it varies so much. But what I can say is adaptogens are always a good thing. Like holy basil tea is a great thing to add into your routine. It's not caffeinated, it's so natural, and it helps regulate your adrenals. That's a great thing to sip on when you get home from yoga or on days that you don't make it to yoga. I like blends that have like L-theanine, ashwagandha, rhodiola, magnolia in them. Like all four of those are great. Um, for gut health, honestly, like gut lining is huge. So like something that has aloe, marshmallow root, glutamine in there. Those are all good gut lining kind of supplement supports. There's a supplement that Designs for Health makes called GI Revive that has that whole like a bunch of those together, which I really like. Um, but I mean, the one thing I will say about supplements, and this is me getting on my soapbox, is that they're not third party tested in our country. So that means that they're not tested for purity and quality. So if you just go to like Target, Walgreens, Costco, like people could be selling you cornstarch. It's probably not poison because like they would get caught and go to jail. But could it be cornstarch? Totally. So I always say try to order, like make sure that you are looking to see if it's what's called third party tested, which means that it's been tested for purity and quality.
Okay, really good to know because you can walk in any GNC around here and it's just thousands of who knows what.
Yeah.
So talk to Savannah, talk to your functional medicine practitioner about what is safe, what is not. Um, so what are your hopes for your own career in functional medicine? You said you're working on a certification. Where do you see that going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am currently employed at a practice called Prime Health in Denver, and they're great. And I love what I do because I have really good work-life balance. The practice that I'm at really values patient care, but also provider like lifestyle. And that is something that is really hard to find in medicine. And that's honestly why I took the job, truly. That and the owners are great. But for myself personally, for my educational career. So the certifying body that I'm getting certified, I think I mentioned, was called the Institute of Functional Medicine. So that's IFM, and they're out in Arizona, and they provide like an official certification that says, hey, you are certified in functional medicine. So that is the certification that I'm currently working on. It's 7 modules. And you sit for a board exam or a big test and do a case study to get certified. So that is currently what I'm working on now. And I just love health education. Like I always have. My first ever degree was in health education, literally. So as you could probably tell in the last however long we've been talking, tons of education in there. I see myself potentially working in like the academic realm potentially in the future. I don't know when. I definitely see myself seeing patients long term as well. But I also want to be mindful of my mental health and my adrenals and all of those things. With my gut too, I notice when my gut symptoms start to flare back up that something's off balance for me. When my life is in flow and I'm balanced, my gut symptoms are very minimal. So again, like your body, your intuition is your alarm, and it's like just really peeling back the layers to learning how to listen to it. So I will use my body as kind of my alarm system as I move through my career, honestly.
That's very inspiring. And I'm sure this speaks to anyone in nursing school, DO or MD school. Do you have any advice for folks in that position in life for how to get more informed on Western medicine, um, I guess, theory and practice, or any advice you have for stress management during those times or like in the health professions?
Oh, you mean like people who are in like nursing med school?
Yeah, or just like in already in the profession and what you would recommend to get more informed and have more of a holistic approach if that's what they're looking for, which I think most people want that.
Honestly, Reedy, pipe dream for me. And like, honestly, I know I could do it. It's just putting down, like putting my heart to it and doing it. Is I'd love to create like an online program for health professionals to learn about functional medicine. Like, I would love to host like lectures and like not necessarily a full program, but like some kind of educational material to be like, this is what you need to know. Here's why it works. Because I think that would be it would be fun for them too. Because like they work through all this stuff all the time, and just having that supplement would be so cool. But yes, IFM, phenomenal resources. Peter Attia's new book, Outlive, people are raving about it. That's a good book that's hot right now. One of my favorite books is Fiber Fueled, actually. It's written by an MD. He's a GI doctor, a gastroenterologist, but it's all about the gut and foods. And I think you would really like it with your cooking. Um, but I would tell them in terms of career. So if they just want to learn education, there's so much of it out there. IFM is probably their best resource. A4M is good too. But if they want to navigate out of that burnout and are just feeling really depleted in Western medicine, I would tell them that there are better options. Like not necessarily better, but just more balanced options. And part of medicine is walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So if you sit and you preach X, Y, or Z, what you learned in school to your patients, but your lifestyle doesn't reflect that, you're out of integrity with yourself. So striving to find a practice, whether it be finding another practice, opening your own, going PRN till you figure it out, whatever it may be, to live a life that feels aligned, like you are going to show up better as a provider, as a nurse, as a person, human, mom, daughter, whatever you are, in your life.
Yeah, and it's so easy. I used to work in the healthcare field in mental health at a hospital, but it's so easy just to pour all of your efforts into the wellness of other people. And it really is easy to lose sight of why you chose to do it in the first place, you know? Um, so I think that's super interesting. And just thinking about everything we've discussed, I kind of want to know, what would be your overall take home message for our listeners on lifestyle, how it relates to yoga,
Mhm.
anything like that?
I honestly, and this is going to sound counterintuitive coming from someone who is like in the wellness world and has been for over a decade, but find your middle ground. Like, yes, listen to the podcast, do the supplement, take your supplements, do your research, see a provider, practice yoga, run the marathons, but also remember to like live your life, because it's health is, if you don't have health, you don't have anything. But part of having health is having your mental sanity and connection and fun and joy. So my take home message would be, make this a priority, like one of your top priorities, but don't let it consume you, because it's really easy once you start going down those rabbit holes to just get to go in, and then it's soon you've cut out all these food groups. You can't go to X, Y, or Z restaurant. You don't want to drink alcohol ever. And it's easy to swing back and forth when you get bogged down in this. So use your inner compass as the guide, find your medium, and like trust in that.
I totally get that. And it's almost like if you are so attached to a certain diet or lifestyle, it's going to be a little bit socially isolating too, you know, just thinking about the big picture.
Yeah, it is. And I've been there, and patients all the time, I watch them come in with mental health kind of on the lower end, because they've been focusing so much on their physical health, which is again so important, but I would argue they're equally important.
Absolutely. And that's yoga, right? Mental,
It
physical,
literally.
spiritual. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have learned so much from this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
I miss Highland yoga.
We miss you.
Literally so much. Yeah, it's the best. The community, you guys are, I mean, I have been out in Denver for about a year and a half, and like have found nothing like it. Like I miss it so much.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I kind of agree. There's really nothing like it, no matter where you go. But we still feel like you're a big part of our community, and I think you've helped a lot of people, and you have so much insight and continue to educate. I think that's your natural inclination. So we really appreciate it.
Of course, love all of you, miss you, and I will come take a slow and steady next time I'm in Atlanta.
Please do. We have so many talented teachers offering it now. But yeah, thanks again, Savannah.
Of course.
And
Thanks
thanks
so
to
much.
all of our listeners for tuning in this week. We can't wait to see you next week. Have a great one. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Your support really does matter. This podcast is produced by Highland Yoga with music by our very own teaching team member, Lauren C. If you want to learn more about Highland Yoga, visit our website at highland-yoga.com or email us to sign up for our weekly newsletter at info@highland-yoga.com. See you next week for more of Find Your Flow.